Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stuart, the Conference Board, and corporate board member, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Diligence Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large of Corporate Board Member Magazine. And I welcome you to the show. This is part two of looking at recruiting and orienting and onboarding board members. And on this session, we're going to specifically look at onboarding. And to refresh your memory on who my two guests are for part two, first of all, to my far right is Julie Daum, who's the leader for the North American board practice for Spencer Stuart. Welcome back, Julie. And to my immediate right is Maria Morris, who's a board member with S&P Global and Wells Fargo. So welcome, Maria. So Julie, why do you think we've sort of found ourselves in this situation where, from what we can gather, people aren't really satisfied with the onboarding process?
I think part of it comes back to the fact that we're recruiting and boards are bringing on younger directors or directors who haven't been in the boardroom. And in the past, onboarding was really just teaching or helping people learn about the company, the business, and because there was an assumption that people had already served on a board, even if it was their own, just because they were a CEO. So you didn't have to help somebody learn how to be a director, learn about the company, learn about the board. So I think a lot of the way boards onboarded is a vestige of the past. So it's really just to have you meet with the CFO and maybe the CEO, get some financials, and you're off and running. There was also a time where board members were expected to be quiet for the first year. And that is no longer the case. And boards expect people to contribute right away, and new directors want to contribute. But there's a lot they need to learn before they can really be effective. And so we're seeing a lot of new directors wanting to have more onboarding and very different onboarding than they had in the past. So it's not just a pushing of information to them, it's having them get to know the management team, having them get to know the other directors individually, giving them a lot of pre-reading, so past year's board minutes. Some of them would like to meet with outside advisors. That's almost never happens, but maybe the auditor, but nobody else, but a lot of them would like to. And then just think about over the first year or two how they can become smarter about the company and the people in it. Many young board members or new board members are also looking for individual touchpoint on the board, a mentor, if you will, so somebody who can really help them understand the unwritten rules, how this board works, why you're discussing what you're discussing then, and really just help them navigate that particular board. And it doesn't happen very often. We've recently done a survey of of new directors over the past couple of years. Less than 10% had a mentor, but a huge percentage said that would have actually liked to have had that.
Yeah. So Maria, in part one, you sort of shared some of your experiences in a chair holding a informal dinner and talking with some of the executives. But when you look back on both of your boards, what besides those, what do you think worked well? What did you find very helpful?
Yeah, I know, it's interesting. Julie and I were talking about this. I had an informal mentor at S&P Global. I went into S&P Global without, knowing people on the board, though I knew of them. And one of the gentlemen who had been there a while actually kind of, took me under his wing in the sense that, your first meeting, you're told to be quiet. You're not quite sure exactly how you should work. And that's not my personality. I want to be able to be part of things. So, he gave me a lot of great feedback about how I actually brought issues to the table, positive feedback, sent me a note right afterwards, said, would you like to have a half-hour discussion just in terms of what's coming up next? So he took that role for me, and to this day, 2 years in, if we're sitting next to each other at dinner, he'll lean over and say, 5 years ago, this happened. So it really was very helpful to me, and while it was informal, he is a gentleman that understood this. He was a CEO, and he understood that that's probably something that was needed, and I really appreciated it. So I actually think it's a good idea to actually formalize that more. The other thing is I'm now a chair of the audit committee in one board and taking on a chairmanship in the other, and so I'll talk a little bit about onboarding into the committee chairs, because that's really important too. And in both companies, we've had an overlap where, as a committee chair is either retiring out or rotating, that they'll name the new committee chair and you'll work together for a couple of months. So the outgoing committee chair will either stay on the committee and or stay with you for the first couple months, so that they're there to also have conversations before and after in terms of things you should be thinking about. The other thing I would say is I actually was part of the Spencer Stuart new director program. I'm in the middle of that now, and actually MetLife, as part of my retirement, actually gave that to me as a gift. And I just would say this to other people that are maybe younger in corporations: if your company is saying you can be on a board, it's not bad to say, if I'm a new director, try to find a program like the Spencer Stuart PwC program or others that are out there that can teach you a lot more about governance.
Yeah. It's tough as a new director because, in a way, you want to listen. You want to not come into the room and start right out, sort of blurting out what they're doing wrong or whatever. Right. So, there is a natural period that you want to sort of listen and understand and take some nuances in how the group works. At the same time, as Julie's mentioned, there is expectations that you aren't just going to sit there like a log, that you're going to start to participate. Right. So it's a fine line on, how you start to work your way in so that you can start on the best the strongest foundation that you can going forward. So, so Julie, we have had the pleasure of working and conducting the Next Gen Board Leader Summits, where we take directors that are in their 30s and 40s and bring them in, and the biggest issue that we had to deal with that they've asked us to deal with is onboarding. So, and what was really interesting is, and these are things that I didn't think of initially, but they said one of the challenges was that certain board members would meet between meetings, and then they would come in and talk about that they've met off-site or they've talked on the phone, but nobody invited them to participate in these discussions. And they said, how do you get involved in the in-between and the discussions outside the boardroom as well as inside the boardroom? And how do you know if the CEO, if they haven't told you, if it's okay to go to the CFO or go, like you said, down a couple levels? So that's why they felt that mentors, they really push the issue of mentors. And should more companies really be considering that, knowing how much we heard from this group?
I think so. You obviously, you have to do your onboarding based on each person who comes in. You're not going to do that with somebody who has been on 3 boards and you do something different for them. But for people who are really new to the boardroom, they really would want as much help as they can get. And so I think boards really just have to think about it and recognize that they also, many of them are working full time. So trying to design something
and have kids,
and that goes. It's not a one. It's not a day. It's it goes over the first year. Of really helping them get up to speed in many different ways. So it's really a plan. It's not just, come a day before the first board meeting and you'll be good. I think a lot of people and a lot of boards do this, but they suggest that the new directors attend every committee meeting. Some boards don't even assign them for the first year, and but I think attending all the committee meetings, if you can do it, if they don't run simultaneously is also a really good idea. And and again, it's this notion of really getting them plugged into the company, and if they can do a site visit, if you're having, I know MetLife used to at least have these big meetings for the high performers, or something where they could attend and just continue to get a handle on and a feel for the company. So it's an ongoing plan. It's not what it used to be. It's the day before, here's some material. And really think it through. They really want it, and because they want to be good directors, but they need more information. So
Maria, you came into the situation as more seasoned in the sense of some of this stuff wasn't new to you, but still, were you challenged at all about between meetings and getting yourself integrated in that way where people were reaching out to you, for information?
I didn't have a bad experience there. I actually had a very good experience in both boards, but I think I probably take some responsibility for that, in the sense that, in both boards that I'm on, we have a chair and a CEO, and I spent time with the chair also saying, what else would the board want me to be thinking about? What else can I do to contribute? And in both cases, the chairs were very helpful. There was a couple of times early on, as an example at Wells, where I didn't want to go right to the CEO on a few things. I called the chair and said, I had these thoughts. We talked it through. She said, why don't you call Tim? So it was good to have the ability to do that. And for new directors, one of the things I would say is, don't hesitate to use those people, whether it's a board chair or whether it's a committee chair or just someone else that you've aligned around, to say kind of what's the protocol about how communications work outside the boardroom. The other thing I'm very careful about is, if I've had conversations, I always loop back to the committee chair and to the chair of the board, just because at the same time, communication's so critical. And going to Julie's point, like if you're trying to get up to speed about what's going on in the other committees, good news about the new digitized board environment, whether it's Diligent or BoardPad, is many of our boards have now asked to have all the materials available to all the board members. And I read it. I read all the materials, and that helps me to understand if another committee's dealing with something that we are, so we can triangulate.
So we have 30 seconds left. If you had to offer a quick tip, that is a must-have for any onboarding process, what would be the one thing that each of you would say is important to make sure that it's part of it?
I think design it for the director.
Yeah. How about you,
and I think design it over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. This has been great, having a two-part series, and I hope people will get the flow that we've provided here, everything from recruiting to orienting to onboarding. So thanks again. And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms, brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, Spencer Stuart, the Conference Board, and corporate board members, along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.